Hi y'all, I'm Alicia, and today I'm going to be discussing Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. This is going to be spoilery, so I suggest clicking out of this video and reading it first before watching this, or if you're okay with spoilers, stay and we can discuss. Let's just get into it. The tension in this book killed me. Like, the entire time, I was like, can you please just get together? Please, this is so frustrating.
The entire book is just both of them thinking, oh my god, I like you and it's not fair because you don't like me back, and I forced you into snares and it's all my fault and I feel so bad because you don't like me and I like you, and I was like, seriously, just admit feelings.
I loved Cordelia and Matthew's platonic because you learn at the end of the novel that it's not very platonic for Matthew, but this platonic relationship they had through the entire novel was so sweet, and I like how they kind of confided in each other where they couldn't tell anyone else. I think one of the first things that really pulled at my heart was when Matthew and Cordelia are dancing at the ball, and Matthew is joking, but he's not actually joking. He's like, for all like I could be a murderer, and Cordelia kind of like just laughs it off, but like he's actually serious, and I was like, oh, Matthew, my heart. Cool fact too, at this ball at the beginning of the novel is I'm assuming this is correct because Cassie's like a queen at research, but husbands and wives aren't supposed to dance with each other at balls. Like, who made that up? Why? You'd assume that your spouse is like the person that you would want to dance with. Like, why are you obligated to dance with like a bunch of other people except your spouse? That makes no sense to me, but I get that the social and political and everything, society was so different back then. Like, it's almost like, don't crowd the single people, like matchmaking happening on the dance floor. Okay, I did have one small plot hole I found in this book, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like a plot hole to me, is when the ghost comes to Lucy, and he's trying to blackmail her into helping him, like, oh, let me forget that I killed my brother, and I'll give you the location of this ghost. And it seemed like a plot hole because can't Lucy just command him to tell her? Like, I get that he's trying to blackmail her, but that wouldn't really work because Lucy can literally just command him to tell her whatever she wants and then send him away. It didn't make sense to me. Especially because after he tells her, she doesn't even know if he's telling the truth and they could potentially be walking into a trap. And it just didn't make sense. I'm like, why wouldn't Lucy just command him to tell her the truth? I wanted to talk about Grace's arc throughout this book because I think it was fantastically done. Because after the first book, I didn't think I could feel bad for Grace. No matter what the author wrote, I was like, no, she's an awful person. I hate her. Like, she's destroying the main character's relationship, James and Cordelia, and I just hate her. But it turns out she's had I knew she had a crappy childhood, but I didn't realize how crappy. Grace is really young when Tatiana kind of forces this gift on her to make, like, she can control men and make them love her. Even though obviously it's not like real love, they just think they love her. But it's really sad because she's so young and didn't have a choice in the matter. Like, it's obvious that she doesn't want the gift. And the gift, I keep calling it a gift because that's what Tatiana called it. But yeah, she clearly doesn't want it. And it has really twisted her relationship with people and the way she views herself and the way she views other people and views relationships. And it's just really sad that that's been her entire life. And she really had no say in it, and it's just destroyed her. Her ability actually reminds me a lot of Ash. Yeah, so both can twist thoughts and emotions of people around them. They make them really like loyal and loving toward them, and it causes just such deep trust issues for both of them and a lot of loneliness. And I just really like that whole dynamic with both of them. And yeah, it just really reminded me of Ash's character. She really has no sense of purpose or identity, and she kind of feels lost, like she's not a real person. Matthew is clearly hurting throughout this entire book. Like, he gets in this huge argument with his parents and he moves out, and he basically admits to James that he feels like a burden. And James, I love this, it's such a tender moment. James tells Matthew that nothing you do troubles me, as in, like, you're not a burden. And he tells Matthew that I wish you loved yourself as much as I love you. And I love in this series that men are allowed to be emotional with each other. Men are allowed to, like, it's almost like it's a normal part. Like, they ruffle each other's hair and they hug each other and they cry, and it's just so refreshing to see that kind of portrayal of men. And it's so good. I just loved it throughout this entire thing, especially Matthew and James's relationship. It was so cute and heartfelt, and just like honestly one of my favorite relationships in the series. And it's not even romantic. I just love their relationship as parabatai. I hate Elias. He is probably the only character in the series that I will continue hating forever because he doesn't get the opportunity for that redemption arc because he dies. I can't believe he asked James for money like that. Like, that is so much money. And then he gets pissed at James and tells him it's his fault and storms out. And, like, I don't understand. Like, I know it's not that simple, but I am just sitting there like, I can't believe Cordelia never saw the side of him before. It astounds me that she never even like glimpsed it before, never even considered it. But I get that to her, like, as her father, she kind of holds him on this pedestal, and that's why she's struggling so much in this series when she learns that, oh, her father is not as perfect as she thought he was, and she kind of has to deal with that, especially, add his death to the mix, and all of a sudden, she never even gets the chance to talk to him about it, never gets the chance to kind of see him redeem himself, and that's really sad. It is so interesting to see Malcolm fade in the series before the Dark Artifices, because in the Dark Artifices, he's kind of off the rails. Like, he is completely evil at that point and just consumed by his desire to raise Annabelle from the dead. And yeah, it was so interesting to see him, especially when he puts Grace in her place and he's like, your enchantments don't work on me, and I suggest you don't use them anymore because it's evil and, it'll lead you down this road that you don't want to go down. And oh, that scene was just so good. And the thing is, this is another reason why I think we really get to see another side of Grace, is when people tell her this. Like, there's another point in the book where Lucy tells Grace, like, how could my brother ever love you? And Grace actually gets really hurt by these comments by Malcolm, by Lucy, and she starts crying in both these scenarios and, like, runs away. And it really kind of pulled your attention toward, like, the fact that Grace, again, doesn't want this gift. She doesn't know how to have real relationships with people, and she's so lonely. I love a quote that Ariadne tells Anna, and honestly, I thought Anna treated Ariadne like crap. And I know if you've watched my Ghost of the Shadow Market review, you know that I thought that Ariadne and Anna's relationship kind of felt like insta-love and was over so quick that I was surprised that Anna was even hurt that deeply. But yeah, so I really enjoyed this quote though from Ariadne. And this is why, sorry, I'm reading off my notes here, but Anna asks her why Ariadne is even staying in the situation, because Ariadne doesn't want a friends with benefit situation. She wants, a real relationship with Anna, and Anna keeps refusing it. And Ariadne replies, because when you want something very much, you are willing to accept the shadow of that thing, even if it is just a shadow. And I love this quote. I think it is so true, and yeah, it hit me deep. The plot twists in this book were amazing. Like, I could not figure out for the life of me who the murderer was throughout the entire, and like my idea kept like shifting from one person to the next, and like it was so good. So at first I actually thought it was Elias because he just got out of the Basilius and he's not a good person, he's a drunk, and all of a sudden these murders start, and I was like, oh, like Elias is back in town, sorry, and I wonder, could he be the murderer? But then he's murdered, and apparently that he knows the person who murdered him, and so I'm like, it has to be an older person then. But then James is having these dreams, and his window is open in the morning, and I was like, oh my god, James is possessed by Belial, and maybe he's the murderer. Like, I actually thought that Cassie was pulling another, like, Jace plotline, where because James almost died, or kind of did die in the previous book, like, is it the kind of thing where because Jace didn't have those enchantments put on him again that he did when he was a baby, like, after he came back to life, and that's why he was able to be possessed by Lilith, like, is that happening to James now? Like, I literally thought it was the same thing. Especially because Lucy makes this comment like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Our parents definitely had the enchantments put on you when you were a baby. And I was like, ooh, but if he almost died and those enchantments aren't good anymore, it could be the same thing. But it turns out it wasn't. But that was still a good theory, okay? Also, another great quote. There were so many great quotes in this novel. But again, I'm reading off my notes, but it's when Alistair asks what it says about him that he can't mourn his own father, and Cordelia says that love is complicated, that it lies beside anger and hatred, because only those we truly love can truly disappoint us. And this, again, it just hit me deep. It's so true. Only the people that we really love can hurt us the most. I love the scene, like, love, where Matthew tells Cordelia, sorry, he stumbles into a room first of all late at night, and he tells her that he knows that she's in love with James, and then he ends up telling Cordelia, I can't even talk today. Sorry, he ends up telling Cordelia his big secret, that he caused Charlotte's miscarriage, and only Jem knows, and it was such a good moment between them, and I just really, really just was so proud of Matthew for finally opening up to her. And I know, like, Cordelia especially, I feel like she's one to bring it up because no one else will, because her own father is an alcoholic, but she does mention to Matthew, like, hey, you shouldn't drink so much, like, this is worrying me, I really care about you, and you shouldn't be going down this path. And especially because she knows what's destroying him now, I really liked this step forward in their relationship, and kind of towards Matthew healing himself. And I just really love that Matthew expects Cordelia to reject him, completely hate him after that, but she hugs him and tells him that he should forgive himself, and it was such a cute moment, such a sweet moment. Then, after I thought it was James, and James is like, oh, I'll just tie myself to the bed, if, I don't get out, we'll know that I'm not the murderer, and then he gets out of the ropes and opens the window in the middle of the night, and I was like, oh my god, like, James is the murderer after all. But it also made no sense because Elias recognized the murderer. Like, would he recognize James? Like, I don't know. So, yeah, it was just throwing me for a loop. Like, I could not figure out who the murderer was. And because James seemed like such an obvious choice, like, I didn't, at this point, I was like, no, James can't be the murderer. Like, it's too obvious. So, yeah, I was just completely lost. Grace, this moment, again, like, I know I started feeling bad for her in this book, but she just absolutely disgusted me when she forced James to kiss her. Like, she forces James to kiss her, and then she gets mad at him for thinking of someone else during the kiss. Obviously, he's thinking of Cordelia, and, like, I was so pissed off. Like, no crap, he's thinking of someone else, because you're a bitch, and he loves Cordelia, and this whole thing is so effed up. Ugh, it just made my skin crawl. Like, at this point in the novel, I was like, that is so gross and disgusting, and she's so selfish, and I don't even care that she grew up abused and neglected. Like, it does not excuse her actions at all, and no, it doesn't, but at the same time, like, this book made me so conflicted because it had scenes like this where I just intensely hated her character, but then it has the other scenes where you're like, oh my god, like, you've had a terrible life, you're completely, like, lost and confused and have no one in your life that loves you, and you feel bad for her, and I didn't know how to feel about her. Like, we learn in this novel that Tatiana actually bought Grace. Like, that disgusts me so freaking much. Like, oh my god, she bought Grace so that she could kind of hone her as her own personal weapon. Not because she actually wanted to, provide a nice, loving home, but because she wanted to use her. The scene where Cordelia tells James to teach her how to kiss, because it's only fair because he kissed Grace, that scene was so freaking hot. He's like, okay, get on top of me. And I was like, this is hotter than half the sex scenes I've read before. Like, there was so much tension in these scenes. Like, all the kissing scenes between them in the book. They were just so good. Oh, I just want them to be together already. There's this really tense argument between James and Matthew at the Shadow Market where, Matthew tells James, like, hey, you seeing Grace is really hurting Cordelia. Like, that's a crappy move. Like, don't do that. Why are you doing this? And then James kind of gets angry and turns it around to Matthew and says, tell me there's something that you love more than that bottle in your hand. And that line was obviously so hurtful to Matthew. Like, James knew it would be hurtful, and like, it was a really, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, that scene just, like, really hit me deep. Like, it was, I don't even know how to describe it. I just really, really enjoyed it, and it was so tense, and it made me, like, sad that both these characters are hurting so much. And I also love that this argument's coming from both of them, like, from a place of love. Like, they really care about each other so much that they hate that the others are doing, the other person is doing, actions that are going to harm them in the long run, are kind of, like, self-destructive. And I really love that when Matthew, sorry, I really love when Matthew cuts his hand, during this argument. James, like, automatically forgets, that they're arguing. He's like, oh my god, let me see your hand, like, I'll heal it. You can tell that they just really, really care about each other, and that's why they're both hurting so much. Why was I starting to like Alistair so much in this book? Like, again, like, Cassie just has this gift of making me feel bad and, like, actually like characters who I previously detested. But yeah, Grace is a little less redeemable than Alistair. I actually really like Alistair, and Grace is never going to be a character that I love, obviously, for, obvious reasons. But yeah, Alistair was just so cute, and it's just clear that he's so hurt and angry at the world, and he really does feel bad for these past actions, and he doesn't think that they're going to forgive him and like allow him to be part of their group. Like that's not what he thinks, but he genuinely wants to express his like sincerest apologies, and he's not even looking for forgiveness. He just wants to get it off his own chest. He feels really bad, and I really like that. That scene where they're both locked in the sanctuary, and Alistair again like asks for forgiveness, or like says sorry for everything that he's done. Thomas admits that he's gay, and I just ship them so hard. Oh, I love them so much. Dear sweet Christopher, bless his soul, but he sees nothing wrong with Grace sneaking into the lab in the middle of the night. Like, not even that, like he doesn't even question it, and then he starts showing her everything in the lab. And I get that this is because of Grace's manipulation, I'm assuming, but then it says that she didn't even use them, so I was a little confused. It's like, is Christopher just this like trusting and naive, and just like, it was so cute though at the same time. But yeah, at first I thought it was because of Grace's gifts or powers, and then I realized that no, Christopher's just a sweet old soul. Another really hot kissing scene between James and Cordelia is when they're kissing and the bracelet breaks. Oh, the scene. At first I thought that this bracelet was somehow keeping James from being possessed, and then like because his eyes go black and he collapses, and I was like, oh my god, now he's fully possessed by Belial or Belial. I'm not sure quite how to pronounce it, but yeah, I was getting really nervous. I was like, oh my god, James just turned into a full-on killer, and his friends are gonna have to find a way to get him back. But luckily that wasn't the case. But oh my gosh, like these lines that James says during all of these kissing scenes are so hot. Like in this scene, he's literally like, that's right, touch me, do what you want, anything. And I was like, oh my god, like this is like so much tension. And again, so frustrating because you're like, please just be together. And at this point, because the bracelet like breaks, you're like, oh my god, they are gonna be together for real now. And it's so exciting. But no, this book just takes you on this huge emotional journey, because the whole time you're just like pining for them to get together, and it never happens. Anyway, and then Lucy finds out that these missing runes are actually on Jesse's body, and at this point I was like, oh my god, Grace is the murderer. Like Lucy literally gets knocked out, and who else knows where Jesse's body is? Like Grace, obviously. So yeah, at that point I was like, oh my god, like Grace is the murderer. But no, that was a wrong guess too. So many theories, none of them were right. Because we know at this point that Matthew has picked up the stele from Christopher, except it wasn't actually Matthew. She's like, oh my god, the murderer is a shapeshifter. But if Grace is the murderer, like, how can she shapeshift? Is this another gift given to her by Belial for working with Tatiana? Like, what is happening right now? I was, again, so lost. So many theories running through my head, and none of them were right. So then you find out that Belial, or whatever his name is, has been possessing Jesse's body during the night. No, sorry, during the day when he's not a ghost, and has been like murdering people. And he made Jesse an anchor, and that's actually why Jesse died when he was given his rune. At I think he was 17. Yeah, he was 17 when he died. And yeah, like this whole plot line, I was like, oh my gosh, so if the anchor is removed, does that mean Jesse comes back to life? Because technically that rune shouldn't have killed him if that anchor wasn't inside of him. So if the anchor's removed, he'll come back to life? Like, I wasn't sure. And we know at the end of this novel that I think Lucy resurrects him. I'm not exactly sure, because it's just so, you can't trust the family tree. Cassie has said that, but Lucy and Jesse are together, like have kids and are a family in the family tree. So I was assuming, and because this whole plotline is bringing Jesse back to life, that Jesse was actually brought back to life. So yeah, I don't know how this is gonna work. I don't know what's happened at the end of this novel. You don't know yet, so you have to wait for the next one. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how that all turns out. I really like when Grace finds out that it's Tatiana's fault that, Jesse died in the first place, because Tatiana didn't trust the Shadowhunters, and not only did she allow the warlock to come, give Jesse his enchantments and whatnot, but she allowed Jesse to be an anchor. And like, I don't understand. Did she know that Jesse was going to die when the rune was placed? And if so, how could she allow that in the first place if she knew that he was going to die? Like, does she actually love her son? Like, I think in that moment, Grace kind of finds out that she thought that both her and Tatiana loved Jesse equally, and that was, Jesse was the only person that either of them ever loved. But then she finds out that Tatiana actually loves herself a lot more than she loves Jesse, and Grace is so hurt. Like, she's like, I can't stop Jesse. Like, she tells Lucy that. She's like, I can't stop Jesse. I can't hurt him. Like, he's the only person I've ever loved, and whoever loved me, and I just can't do it. And yeah, that just kind of broke my heart a little bit. Okay, there's one point in this book where I was like, okay, is Lilith just every single side character in this novel? Like, seriously? It's like we can't trust anybody anymore because she can shapeshift, she can literally possess anyone and turn herself into anyone. And this whole making Cordelia her paladin by, like, appearing as all these different people and, like, kind of prompting Cordelia to go to the hill and, swear herself to Wayland the Smith, but obviously it was Lilith. And yeah, it was just like, we can never trust anyone in this book ever again. Okay, a moment where I just hated Tatiana more than I already did, which again didn't think was possible because I despise Tatiana. I despise her. She's an awful, terrible, horrible person. And she tells Grace to seduce Jesse back to their side. Ew, no. And she literally tells Grace, "Oh, you're not real siblings." And they're close enough. Like, that is just disgusting. Like, ugh. And the fact that Grace is like, the thing is, not even that they're siblings. That's not even the first thing that she thinks of when, oh, I can't seduce Jesse. She thinks, I can't ruin this one real loving relationship that I've ever had in my life with these powers. Like, I can't. And good for Grace. Like, she doesn't do it. I think that's really the moment where she actually, that is the moment. She breaks the mirror and she runs away. She really, she isn't following her mother's advice anymore. She's not, just blindly following, thinking, oh, we both love Jesse, she's doing everything to get Jesse back, because that's not true anymore. She kind of realizes that Tatiana is a horrible person just working for herself, not for Jesse. And I really, really love a line in this scene, again, reading from my notes, but Grace, again, realizes that Tatiana didn't give her control over women, only men, not because women have no influence or are weaker, but because she never wanted Grace to have power over her. And that just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Like, I hadn't thought about it like that before, and it was so good. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. The end of this book was so frustrating. When James tells Cordelia, I've never loved you like I loved Grace. Or actually, that wasn't even the words he uses. He says, I've never felt about you like I felt about Grace, meaning that he's never loved Grace the way he loves Cordelia, except he couldn't have just said that. Or when the doorbell rang, he couldn't have taken like 10 seconds to clear that up, because it literally sounded like he told her that he didn't care for her the way he loves Grace. Like, he's always gonna love Grace and he's never gonna like Cordelia like that. Like, it literally sounded like that. And I was like, really? You can take 5 seconds to clear it up and be like, Cordelia, I love you. I want to stay married to you. Like, I want it to be a real marriage. He could have just said that. Like, it caused so many issues. And then the convenience of Cordelia seeing Grace with James, and Grace is like, oh my god, you're the guy for me. And James says, thank God. Like, what? Oh, it was so frustrating. I was like, James, seriously. And I get that he said that because he wanted to get Grace in the house so she couldn't run away, and that he could actually like confront her about the bracelet and her controlling him the entire time. But he couldn't have like yelled up the stairs and like, Cordelia, I have something to say to both of you. But like, again, like, I get that he wanted to speak to Grace alone because she's been controlling him for years. Like, he does realize this. Like, she tells him, like, you've kind of tainted my entire, adult, like, teenage years, I guess, all the way from, like, I think 12 years old it is, when he first meets Grace. But yeah, like, his whole life has kind of been warped by Grace, and like, he's pissed about it. And I understand that. I would be pissed too. But like, the fact that he doesn't doesn't have time, because Cordelia kind of runs away. He doesn't, have the time to explain this to Cordelia before she runs, and it just caused so many problems. But I did really love the conversation between him and Grace. It was so tense. To make matters worse, Cordelia goes to Matthew, and Matthew's like, I love you, come to Paris with me. And up until this point, I am not a fan of this love triangle, just because I really liked Cordelia and Matthew's kind of platonic relationship throughout this entire book, and because it's so obvious that James and Cordelia love each other so deeply, like, I just didn't like that Matthew all of a sudden is thrown in there, especially because Cordelia doesn't feel the same way about him that she feels about James, and that's kind of what separates Jem and Will and Tessa's relationship from James and Matthew and Cordelia's is that Tessa did love Jem and Will equally, and that's what made the love triangle so great. But in this, it's really obvious, and it literally states that Cordelia doesn't feel that way about Matthew. And yeah, so I'm really curious of how this is going to turn out. And either way, I know Matthew's going to be hurt, which I'm sad about. At the end of this novel, James is like, oh my god, I can't focus, my head's spinning. I was like, yeah, me too, James. Literally, this book gave me emotional whiplash. I can't deal with it. There were so many plot twists and so much drama in this book. Like, I literally, it was 650-ish pages, somewhere around there. And like, I literally, it could have been like 1,000 pages longer and I wouldn't have minded because it was so engaging and suspenseful and I could not figure out what was actually happening. Like, it made me want to keep reading. So I think all my questions going into the next one are basically revolving around Lucy and did she actually revive Jesse? Like, did she bring him back to life? And what about Malcolm's role in all this? Like, is he going to try and force Lucy to bring back Annabelle? Like, what happened to Lucy? Like, what are the consequences of trying to bring Jesse back like that? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I didn't talk a lot about it in this review, but I think it's just because I have so many unanswered questions for the next one, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. So yeah, that was it for my review today. It was quite long and rambly, but if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video. Thanks guys, bye!